So why do we bother with a rural-urban holistic development? Well, we believe that recognition of interdependency between all global citizens, that understanding mutual synergies is a starting point for global well-being in the face of global climatic challenges, and that the current pandemic has just quickened the pace of change in ways not yet fully factored in. And so if we believe in better together approach, then we have to demonstrate the practicalities, the advantages, and the solutions required, recognizing that the links between urban and peri-urban and the links between urban and remote rural may differ in needs and remedies. Historically, examples of good practice in joint working have been difficult to find, as many floundered on an inequitable relationship, poor governance, and a lack of both human and financial resources, mostly on the rural side, to build sustainable partnerships. Good governance needs to be assuring and enabling, but there has been a standoff for accountability between public elected representatives, elected third sector representatives, and a disparate business sector dubious about endless meetings and bureaucracy. How many entrepreneurs, private and social enterprise entrepreneurs, have we heard declare either a frustration at accessing funding or at waiting for planning decisions in their favor? There have been twin town experiments, community appraisals, excellent innovative leader, local action groups, and community-led local development. These have all strengthened the ability of rural organizations to work together. We have had previous European Commission rural-urban projects, and with smart villages, a very helpful joint initiative between different Commission departments. But it's not mainstream. That is the challenge for all of us, how to and who to persuade to take on board robust conclusions, discuss them and mainstream them so that they do not remain isolated pockets of change. The EESC, the European Economic and Social Committee, is one statutory European body that supports this work, as is probably the Committee of the Regions at a European level. And I'm sure that the European Rural Parliament that I refer to is also a movement that is willing to consider this work at its next full Parliament conference in Poland next year. However, with Robust, there is now much more to build on, and with the Commission's long-term vision and an explicit reference in the action plan, a determination to make real progress. There will be, as we've heard, an observatory and a process to measure success or failure of projects. Remembering, of course, that such interrelated ways of decision-making need perhaps 10 years to be embedded within spatial planning, as we heard yesterday. Rural and urban bring different attributes to the table, whether it is linkages between producers and consumers of rural goods, from farm to fork, to health, green, and cultural tourism, or ecological protection and renewable energy resources needed by all of us. And that's why you need ground rules to ensure equity and multidisciplinary policies with sustained funding. Back to the Future is about helping all citizens to understand the importance of heritage, both cultural and ecological, as assets to be protected, and using modern digital and other techniques, assets to build economic and social resilience, the well-being agenda we've referred to this morning. This is the inclusive Green Deal. Balancing competing demand for the world's finite resources is complicated and confrontational, but there has to be a deal. New rural will be more plural, introducing greater competition from urban for housing, as we've heard this morning, for recreational land, and for deeper environmental protection, even wilding. There will be opportunities for economic gain, but also challenges for social cohesion, which may need community mediation. And I think this will be an extremely important challenge. Only shared governance can mitigate. Is farming today, for example, a gold mine or a land mine? Is there a conversation between the shepherd and vegan? As young people still leave, taking their skills and optimism with them, building rural resilience is still work in progress. This lamb got himself into a mess, but the lamb, I think, is a typical young person who, amongst thousands of others, have left rural areas over the last century or so because they felt that the future for them was not in this hole that was rural. And we obviously have a responsibility for that loss of young people. In this sense, this is the intergenerational challenge. That man in chair needs to get up from the chair. And Euromontana, for example, has shown us the way forward. There has to be a role for the aging population, but it'll be a different one. We have to let go of our responsibilities, but to take on new responsibilities of mentoring young people. And the young people who may be the next generation of rural people may not be rural people themselves. That's my granddaughter in the picture. She is half French, lives in Cardiff, but maybe actually the person who wants to farm in the future. So it's extremely important that the old and the young work together to make certain that there is a sustainable transition and that there are still people able to work the land and to meet the multi-demands into the future. There are no jobs on a dead planet, and some not in my backyard people, to them, entrepreneurship smells. One of the answers to the imbalance between rural and urban is rural proofing. But I have a problem with rural proofing as a concept. It has been around for some time and re-emphasized at the 2016 Cork 2 conference and the current long-term vision for rural areas. But it is very difficult to monitor and evaluate transparently. I am, however, encouraged that this time the Commission will put in place from a senior level mechanisms to make it happen. And I know that there will be well-meaning people to deliver. However, taxpayer funding historically and probably logically is allocated on a per head of population basis, with some weighting for disadvantaged, and then dispersed through rigid departmental silos. Tackling rural problems on a per head basis for sparsely populated and remote regions hasn't worked effectively. This is why rural schools, banks, shops have closed, creating a downward spiral in economic and social well-being. Departmental silos cling onto their purses and connectivity in more deep tunnel than open bridges for shared needs and initiatives. There is a risk here also for your anchor institutions, as mentioned this morning. Rural proofing also smacks of being an add-on, a last-minute tag after a policy tailored for the urban improvement has been designed. Rural-urban brings all parties to the table at the outset, and that is why I prefer rural-urban proofing and a long-term vision for all European citizens, mutually sharing aspirations and taking joint responsibility for vulnerable resources. This should be our goal. That is why, and as you can see here, this is part of the new challenges, that the honeypots, that the urban people believe that access to the countryside does not have to be regulated they want the freedom to come and go. And we need to meet these challenges and to try to disperse the pleasures, the rightful pleasures of urban people to enjoy the countryside. That is why Tom Jones has this big idea for a European Charter of Rural-Urban Rights and Responsibilities enshrined in lifelong learning. There is a United Nations-backed Peasants' Charter, and in the UK, a long-established Countryside Code. A charter would be much wider in its identification of rights and responsibilities for all citizens based on lifelong learning and understanding of how to respect fragile earth and those who work and live in both rural and urban areas. A concept of interdependability so clearly demonstrated in this slide, the Tree of Life, a Mexican work of art, diminished by a piece of poetic license from me when I first saw it. But it's all about the interdependability of the various people within communities, urban and rural. We still need the butcher, the baker and candlestick maker, but also the teacher and carer, the paramedic and ambulance driver, the landscape gardener, and not least, the broadband provider. Diolch yn fawr, which is in Welsh, means thank you very much for listening.